This video is supported by Galder's Gazetteer, a 5e expansion for advanced players.
Alright, super short video this week. The topic is Legendary Resistance. I was inspired by a thread I saw on Twitter, authored by Matt Colville. Quoth he, "Still puzzling over the intended player behavior around Legendary Resistance." The thread is a good read and I'll link it below, but overwhelmingly based on what I saw, the intended player behavior is frustration. People feel like they are cheated. They use their coolest class feature just to have the DM choose for it to be worthless. And players feel like they have to metagame. That is, they're engaging in tactical play that is outside of the fiction. They know they have to get the baddie to spend their 3 legendary resistances before they can hit them with the spell they really want to use. And rather than feeling like organic tactical play, that really feels like they're just gaming a mechanic. But that tweet's phrasing, like a lot of things on Twitter, is kind of loaded. It presumes there is an intended player behavior, when in reality, I think Legendary Resistance is mostly a DM-oriented design. Let's be real here. The Dungeons & Dragons game is a product to be sold, and that fact is something that always has to be in the forefront of the franchise lead's mind. From a business point of view, they have to grow the game. And the thing they need to grow the game is more DMs. They are always the limiting factor. There's lots and lots of people who would love to play, but can't find a table to play at. So it is absolutely essential that the game make it as easy as possible for people to DM and lower those barriers to entry. And Legendary Resistance is an example of that. One of the most frustrating, one of the most discouraging things for DMs is when their big boss fights fizzle out. No one likes when that happens, and if just one of your friends tells you that they didn't have a good time, it's enough to make some people quit the hobby. Legendary Resistance is kind of a hack to foolproof your boss fights, so your epic finale doesn't end up being anticlimactic. And if your group finds this I win combo that they can use in every single boss fight, then you've really drained a lot of the tension and excitement out of the game. That also makes people quit. And for a second, let's try to imagine if you tried to hard design around that. You would have to listen to Dragon's stat block, it can't be stunned, it can't be paralyzed below half hit points, and all these other conditions, just to make the dragon be able to stand a chance against your party. And if you as the DM misread or misremembered one little line in that big stat block, you've thrown all your hard work out the window. The universal applications of Legendary Resistance is a safeguard against that kind of bad play experience. With this mechanic, DMs no longer need to be tactical experts or have a really deep understanding of all their players' abilities in order to deliver a fun, tactical, and engaging fight. It also gives DMs another way to adjust the difficulty of an encounter on the fly, whether or not they're going to use those Legendary Resistances just to eat damage or use it to stop a real save or suck effect. It's also an easy way to add texture to your fights. A brute would use the Legendary Resistances on the first 3 effects, but a strategic foe will pick and choose when to use them. Having legendary creatures be able to resist encounter-ending magical effects at will also ensures that your boss battles are mostly going to be conquered by dealing damage. Hello, marshals, but they still allow for the possibility of those encounter-ending effects. And to be fair to my wannabe rival,
you can have a one-sided feud. That would be really pathetic.
Matt Colville did eventually reach this point in his thread, that Legendary Resistance doesn't stop those encounter-ending effects from happening at all. They stop them from happening too soon. And that's the thing with save or suck effects. What would have been anticlimactic on your first turn, after a few rounds of getting beat up by a dragon, suddenly seems really clutch and satisfying. So Legendary Resistances are a very easy to implement tool to allow your boss fights to feel like boss fights. They are great for new DMs. But on this channel, we are not new DMs, this is for advanced Dungeon Masters. I got 3 alternative mechanics to Legendary Resistances. We're going to go over those, their pros, their cons, and at the end of it, I'm also going to give one tip that no matter what you do, I think you should really implement to make your Legendary Resistances feel a lot better to your players. We're going to go ahead and breeze through these 3 mechanics really quickly before we get to our universal tip. The first thing you can do is replace Legendary Resistance with something like the fighter's Indomitable. If you fail a saving throw, you can just choose to re-roll. Using this lucky style mechanic has a few advantages. First of all, it's really easy to do. It's not convoluted or hard to remember. From the player's point of view, it still feels like there's a chance that their powerful effect is going to go off, even though granting that retroactive advantage swings that saving throw heavily in your favor. But not 100%. And that's one of the disadvantages to using an Indomitable style mechanic. You can still end the encounter in 1 turn. Everybody's rolled low twice in a row before, and this doesn't give you any insurance that your carefully constructed boss fight isn't going to fall apart. And this is especially true at higher levels if you have canny players, because while things like strength and constitution tend to scale with CR, intelligence and charisma don't. And things like banishment, feeble mind, maze are the ones that really destroy boss monsters. If you wanted to tinker a bit more, instead of having a set number of uses, you could have it be able to re-roll anytime it's above half its hit points. That way when the monster is bloodied, it's more susceptible to these big effects. And I think that makes narrative sense too. The second fix is instead of having a set number of uses for Legendary Resistance, have it recharge, similar to the Dragon's Breath weapon. I really like recharge. I think it's one of those underused mechanics in 5th edition. It adds a lot of tension and uncertainty to the fights. You get 1 free use, and then you have to wait to see if you can do it again. So this creates an area of exigency, this opportunity where you have to act or else you're going to lose it. Because once that legendary resistance is down, you have to strike it again before it recharges. And that's a great way to add drama. You can also tweak the recharge rate. Like a young dragon would recharge only on a 6, but an ancient one would recharge on 4 through 6. The obvious downside with recharge is that's another thing the DM has to keep track of. I am notoriously bad about rolling these things. It's a lot easier to tick off marks than it is to try to remember a new thing every single round. Our last alternative to legendary resistance is a mechanic stolen from 4th edition. In that game, legendary creatures like dragons had a feature that just let them end an effect on their turn. If they could save, they automatically did, and if they couldn't save, they end the effect anyway. And this works pretty nicely. If you stack many features on the dragon, you can only get rid of one of them at a time, but it stops you from having a lockdown combo going for the entire fight. There are some drawbacks to this mechanic though. Because you can only end an effect on the legendary creature's turn, you can get really screwed by the initiative order. A hold person and a whole round of beatings is really going to take a lot of your boss. So I think my implementation is going to be similar to legendary actions. The creature can end an effect as a reaction, but I might say you can't do it immediately after the turn the effect hit you. I still want the players to have some fun. That's the whole point of doing this tweak, remember? One of the biggest problems with legendary resistances is that it feels so gamey. Players feel like they're being robbed by their cool moments by a obtuse mechanic. Even the rules phrasing, you just choose to succeed instead, doesn't make any sense within the fiction of the world. So my universal tip is to add descriptions. Instead of artlessly just saying the creature uses legendary resistance, take the time to weave it into your narrative. Remind the players that they are not being robbed of their cool effect, they are expending a creature's resource. The wizard's hand begins to turn into a claw and his nose becomes more rat-like. Then with great focus, he bursts a blood vessel and reverts to his regular form, shaking off your polymorph. You can have physical clues on your creature, 3 great plates of armor that will break each time a legendary resistance is used, gemstones around a priestess's amulet that flash then grow dark. Or you could narrate these resistances as being things from the environment. A cloud of bats swarm in to protect Strahd, or a statue jumps in the way of a deadly spell. The last thing I'd recommend on the narrative front is to also use a bit of maybe misdirection. If you take the time to write out some dialogue that the NPC or monster is going to use each time a legendary resistance is in play, hopefully your players will be paying more attention to what is being said and what is happening, rather than the fact that their high-level spell was just a dud. Alright, that's the video, folks. Like I said, short, sweet, to the point. The first revision of Galder's Gazetteer is now available on DriveThruRPG. Mostly it was correcting typos and style consistency, but there are some changes to the rules. We worked out some bugs and made minor tweaks. For all the details, check out the Discord, link below. And I'm in the middle of writing an adventure. My Halloween one-shot was such a huge success, I'm writing the full adventure out and I'm going to publish it on my $1 Patreon, which is where I put all my stuff. My home game notes, my YouTube scripts, and dozens of streams with design and interviews. And I did this video mostly off the cuff, just some loose thoughts that I have. So I'm sure there's lots of mechanics or design ideas that I didn't even touch on. So if you have some ideas on how you would improve legendary resistance, make sure to let me know in the comments below.